Okay, so let's go back through our notes because you should be adding this to your notes every week. Let's go back to our notes and just hit the big takeaways so far this semester. So, big picture takeaways. Leadership is an inside job. It begins with me. It begins with you, right? I have to, as a leader, be wholly and fully accountable to myself and begin here. I must do the development individually before I can expect to influence and gain the respect of others as a leader. You activate your leadership right now every single day. You do not wait for a title. You do not wait for someone to anoint you as the leader. You find ways to show up as a leader all the time, and you can do this a million times throughout your day, whether it's within your families, at your part-time or full-time jobs, whether it's with your children, whether it is with your best friend or your boyfriend or girlfriend, okay? Show up as a leader. Remember that leadership is dynamic, it is complicated, but it is highly rewarding and challenging because it deals with people. Leadership is a human endeavor. One cannot be a leader on one's own, although people try that, right? In order to be truly successful, you must be able to influence change, and we influence change through impacting others. So we must be ready to be the kind of person that people are going to look to, right? That has a vision, that can articulate that vision, that embodies that vision, that we're not just all talk, but we actually walk the walk. So be working on this every day. Bosses are ubiquitous. That word ubiquitous means everywhere. We have bosses all the time. We've all experienced them, right? Those are not leaders. We know the difference. When we encounter a leader, we feel it. We know it because real understands real, right? So we're looking to understand the difference, and we're making sure that we are living up to that challenge of being a real leader. And remember, the ultimate definition of leadership in this class is leaders are effective agents for positive change, right? That ultimately we're here to do the most good. And so we're looking to be positive. Looking back on chapter 5, we talked about the 3 core leadership skills: administrative, interpersonal, and conceptual. And we talked a lot about that in your discussion boards. Your conversation was very interesting. Last week, we talked about leadership strengths. And this is an important chapter, right? Traditionally, we tend to think that we need to spend so much time dealing with our weaknesses, right? But what we learned last week is that our strength is actually the place where we have the most room to grow. And that's great news because, yes, we should minimize our weaknesses. It's not that we should ignore them. We should be aware of what they are and minimize them so that they don't cause a problem. However, where we should be spending the most time is maximizing our strengths. And this is important to hear because usually when we're good at something, we tend not to work that hard at it because it comes easily to us. But that is where our strength lies, and that is also where our leadership strength lies, right? Because it's individual and innate to you. And so you watch the video about the leadership lid. I think this is really clear and understandable that as the leader, your group will only be as successful as you are and as much work as you put into maximizing your particular strengths, because then you can recognize and develop the strengths of others around you. This is so, so, so important. So we're going to lead from our strengths, right? We're going to minimize our weaknesses. We're going to build teams that lean on one another's strengths. So if I'm an interpersonal person, I'm going to make sure that on my team, I have a very high administrative person and very high conceptual people, and we're going to work together and lean on each other's strengths. This is highly important, right? So this is key. This is critical, and I hope that we all understand these basic things, right? We talked about the power of positive psychology. This is really important and foundational to you, and it should really impact a lot of what you are doing in your own life if you read about positive psychology and how important it is, right? That if we really want to see success and pull success from our teams and from others around us, that we really should lead by giving them the opportunity to grow, by coaching them, and by really finding the places where they're doing well and building from there. Okay. We also talked about growth mindset, so important, and you guys took a self-assessment, the VIA, on discovering your strengths. So that is awesome. All right. So this week is chapter 3, and be careful because we're going out of order. So make sure you're staying with us. Chapter 3 is understanding leadership styles. Okay. Now this chapter begins on talking to you and introducing the concept of leadership philosophy. Okay. A leadership philosophy is a document that a leader creates that basically reveals the underlying principles and beliefs that that leader has about leadership, right? So it basically is a document that a leader provides that basically states for the rest of us, what do I believe? That informs how I think, how I behave, and how I act as a leader, right? And I point this out to you because it's an important document for all leaders to really sit down and consider. But it's also because next week that will be your first big assignment, is that you will be required to create a leadership philosophy that will synthesize all of the different theories and foundational concepts that we have learned about in the last few chapters, and ask you to think about, where do you fall on those belief systems and what do you believe, and put it together. Okay, and we'll talk more about that next week, but I wanted to make sure and emphasize it for you now. Okay, this chapter will also be talking about leadership styles. There's 3 main leadership styles. Okay, there's autocratic, democratic, and laissez-faire. And I wanted to pull this out for you. So you can see here that what I want you to understand is that the leadership styles is a spectrum, okay? So you have autocratic over here, democratic, and laissez-faire. Now, autocrats are leaders who say, I'm in charge, and this is how it goes. You're going to do this, this, and this. There's no room for opinion, okay? Democratic leaders are sort of in the middle, and they have a structure and they have a framework for how things are going to go, but they also really value the group input, and they seek out the group input, and that informs which way things are going to go. And then on the far left, we have laissez-faire. Laissez-faire is a French term, and it just means hands off. So that means that the leader believes that the group is going to function and create structure for itself, and that they can completely back away. Okay, and if you were to think through some of the bosses and leaders you've had in your past, you could probably identify where they are on the scale. The question is, where do you think you innately fall on the scale, right? Because not all of us are going to be fully autocratic or fully laissez-faire or fully democratic, but where do you think you mostly sit, okay? The next thing the chapter is going to talk about is McGregor's theory X and Y. And McGregor's theory X and Y, don't let it confuse you. It's just about, what do you believe about human beings and our motivation to work? Do you believe that human beings basically try to avoid work and basically need a lot of direction in order to get things accomplished and don't really care to set goals for themselves? If you believe that, then you are on the spectrum of theory X. So theory X believes that you believe that people are not motivated to work, that they avoid responsibility, and they prefer and need direction and structure. If you believe that people actually want to achieve and want autonomy and they desire goals, then you would be someone who believes in McGregor's theory Y. Okay, so that's about people's motivation to work. What do you think about people and their motivation to work? Later on, McGregor came up with theory X and Y, and later on another researcher came around and created theory Z, which basically puts those two things together, kind of the way democratic does up here on this spectrum, right? It basically says that people are both. So again, ask yourself, what do I believe about people and work? Do I believe that they need all the boundaries and they need all the expectations and you need someone to watch over them? Or do you believe that people really will do it on their own? Or are you somewhere in the middle? And again, this may flux and change depending on who is in your group and in your organization, right? So these things are important, and this is what is being covered this week, okay? And again, make sure that you understand all these foundational principles we have talked about in all of these chapters, because next week you will be asked to think about what you believe based on those principles and put them together into a document that states how you feel about leadership on all of these different levels. And I will specify what will be necessary to hit the requirements and criteria for that assignment.